So thank you all for coming. My name is Maor. I work at Proofpoint. It's a security company. I work in the department of SaaS application security. I lead the research over there, and we're going to talk about Google Apps scripts, basically, some feature that can be used in Google Apps Script, like how to access the platform or stuff like that. And we're gonna see some example of abusing this platform, and we'll talk a bit about how to build a phishing campaign using Google Apps Script and how to scale it up. First thing before we start, how many of you are familiar with Google Apps Scripts? Raise your hands. Not many, just one, two. How many of you familiar with the concept of third-party applications? More than Google Apps Script. That's good. So if we're talking about Google Apps Scripts, we're actually talking in they represent or subfamily of Google Apps of third-party application. For those of you who are not familiar with third-party application, I guess you're familiar with that. You're just unfamiliar with the name. So a quick example of third-party application. Let's go to the New York Times website. You see it? Yeah. Let's try to do something like that. So the New York Times website, when I click login or I want to register as a subscriber, the internet doesn't work. Why is that? No network. Can resolve. One moment, please. Well, I'll try to resolve it during my presentation, but I'll have to deal with it. So just a second, I'll talk while I'm saying. So, in order to log in or do something like if you want to authorize, yeah, I know I just need to connect to the network. I'll try to connect to my phone instead of the presenter's network. Yeah, so we're connected right now. So if you want to log in or access or identify as a user to, let's say, the New York Times apps, or to the New York Times website, you have this login page, which allows you to log in with Facebook, log in with Google, do stuff like that. That's actually a third-party application authorization model that if I'll click right here, I'll pop up a window that will let me authorize as a Google user and allow Google or New York Times to access cloud services that on behalf of my account. They will be able to impersonate my user and my credentials in order to access my account and data. So if we take a quick look on this page, we have the permission page of third-party apps that I installed in my account. So we can see the New York Times app, and we have you can see that they can access my Gmail account. They can read and send and delete messages. They have access to my Google contacts and basic account information. Well, all right. So now that we understand that, let's go back to the presentation. So as I said, when we're talking about Google Apps Scripts, it's actually from the family of third-party application. So it's actually serverless code that allows you to do stuff like regular third-party application. If third-party application comes in a way of, let's say, a web application as the New York Times or a mobile application like many other familiar applications that you know. Google Apps Script is actually a serverless code, which allows you to access cloud services like regular third-party application. Well, the language that we write Google Apps Script is JavaScript, but it doesn't mean that I can execute code within your browser. I can do that, but it's not necessarily what the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to access, as I said, cloud services like the Gmail app, like the Drive app, like performing URL fetching and stuff like that. So we're going to see some examples of it, but first, before we start, before we will see some malicious example, we'll try to understand better how Google Apps Script actually works and what are the legitimate usage of such service. So if we're talking about type of script, we have the standalone script, which is a regular standalone file within my OneDrive. So in order to create a standalone script, we'll just see an example soon enough. But in order to create a standalone script, what I need to do is just to create a file in my OneDrive and start coding. We have bound to G Suite document scripts, which is I'm sure all of you are familiar with Office macros, right? Correct? Yeah, who doesn't? So it's basically the same idea here, just in our case, it is bound to an online spreadsheet or an online document within Google Docs or Google Sheets or stuff like that. But just to keep in mind, scripts can only be bound to doc sheets and slides and form documents. That's it, I think. The interesting thing about it is the script is connected like in a virtual way. If you will download the binary file of the spreadsheet or the Google Docs or the slides or whatever, you won't be able to tell the difference between the file. Like if you binary compare these two files, one with Google Apps Script and one without, it would be the same because the link that connects the Google Apps Script is actually in the cloud and not in the binary. I know this because I checked it, obviously, but it's an interesting thing to know. And the last type of script is also an interesting, also, my opinion, an interesting type of script is a web app, which allows us to actually create an ad hoc web application and obviously use all the capabilities of Google Apps Script and Google services. For example, I can create an HTML page, which I can send to each one of you, and it will require or ask you for permission to access your contacts or send emails or do stuff like that. So we have that kind of stuff too. Let's try to look for an example. Yeah. So let's start with a simple example of the example service that we have that I created here just for the presentation. So as I was saying, I can create a function or a script that access your all your attachments. It's a very simple code. I'm sure you can understand it. So what it does is actually get all the inbox threads and get all the messages and go over in a loop, for loop, and access your attachment. And what it does over here is just print it to the log. Okay, not very interesting, but you can think about like a legitimate usage of doing such thing, like one colleague of mine He's just looking for using Google Apps Script to look for emails from our CEO. And when he sees, when the script detects such an email, that the script just mark it as read because he's a spammer. You know, you don't want to read the emails from the CEO. It's never, I mean, always boring, right? Yeah, so legitimate usage of such Gmail access example. Another interesting example is accessing your Drive app and doing some search in files. Another really simple example, like you can look for certain dates, or you can look for certain keywords or titles or whatever you want to look for. And you can easily access it by this, I mean, it's really easy. You can see it by yourself. Another interesting example that you can do with that is URL fetching. That's actually, if you think about it, like in malicious context, we're not talking about malicious stuff yet. We will soon enough. But if you think about malicious content here, it's quite interesting. But let's start with the legitimate usage. I'm just querying some forecast or weather API in order to get the weather and just print it to the log. Okay? Let's see how it works. In order to do that, I'll just press run, and I will choose which of the function I want to execute. I'll press the URL fetch, and it's running. Ask for permissions. Obviously, we don't want to do things without permissions, right? So let's review the permissions. And this is my account, so yeah, let's approve it. And we can see that this particular script wants to access my Gmail and read and send and delete. This is the scope that I'm using. It's not actually doing all of that, but it has the permission to do that. We can view and manage file in Drive. That's the second function that we've seen here. And connect to an external API. You can review the scopes here if you don't understand it, what it actually means. You can review each one of them, and it will explain to you better. But as we understand that, because we wrote this, we'll press allow, and the script is now being executed. And let's check the logs. Yeah, we can see that that's the answer from this specific API. So nothing excited so far, but I'm just showing capabilities that we have. Yeah, one thing that I want to show is how to actually create a Google App script. Like if I want to create a standalone script, I'm just standing in my Google Drive, and I press, I want to create Google App script. So we will go, it will open this script editor, and you can start writing code here. Like if I want to get contacts up, and I can do get contacts, something like that. Very simple, very easy. Yeah, let's leave this page. And we can see, by the way, let's refresh this page, and we can see here that we have the example services script that we authorized, and we see that the scope that we allowed it to access. Okay, nice. Another type that we talk about is bound to Google Sheets. So let's have a quick look here. I just created a Google Sheet, and if I want to bound a script to it, I'm just going to Tools and press the Script Editor. And again, we'll see this script editor again. So again, I can write whatever I want here, and it will be the same as the standalone, like same capabilities and same stuff. So how do you spread Google Apps scripts? I know I didn't show the web application example. I'll show it after this slide in order to understand it better. So let's talk about spreading Google Apps script. How can we do that? So if we're talking about standalone scripts, so it's really easy to share it. All I need to do, as I said, it's a file within my OneDrive, in my Google Drive, sorry. So what I basically need to do is like using Google capabilities of sharing files. So I can share this file with each one of you, and you will get an email. This user wants to share a file with you, blah, blah, blah. Really easy, really straightforward, nothing too sophisticated. In order to share a bound script, so the same. I can share the script, but I can share the document. So if the document contains a script, so you can imagine what will happen. So we talked earlier about web apps, and I'm going to another method to spread Google Apps Suite is creating a web app and share its link. As I said before, web applications are generally ad hoc web application. So when I create one, I get an online link which I can access from anywhere with permission. So let's just check a quick example of Google Apps Scripts. Web application example, sorry. So yeah, this is a web application that what it does is actually using the content service in order to return this JSON to the user. And if you want to publish it, so we just press publish and deploy as a web application. And you can see here, I want to create a new version of this app, and I want it to be executed as me, let's say. And I want, it asks here who has access to this app, so I said anyone, even anonymous, can actually access this script, this web application. So let's update the code, and we'll get the link, and let's try to access it. And you can see my screen, right? So the else switch is just saying, yeah, let's redirect, because we don't want to stay. And here's the address. You can see googlescript.com with the script ID. And let's press it, and we'll see status OK as expected. Well, nice. Another example that we can see here is actually a web app that, in order, by the way, to create the web app, I need to override the doGet method and then write my code within it. So in this example, we can see that we actually, if the other example just return a JSON or return a specific HTML page or whatever you want to create over there. In this specific example, we're talking about accessing the contacts app and get the contacts and get the email address. Now, you're probably wondering, how can I get like the accessing user contacts? Because I don't want to get my contacts, right? I want to get the accessing user. So if I deploy it again, so let's create a new version, and you can see that we have an option to choose if we want the executing user would be me or the accessing user. So we'll choose the accessing user, and we'll say yeah, anyone. Let's update it again, and let's copy it, and we'll see that if I'll try to access it, we'll get this page which asks for permissions again. But this time it will ask from the accessing user, and the script will be executed by the accessing user, not by my user. So yeah, that's the same model actually, and we can see it right here. So let's go back again to the presentation, and let's talk about some interesting stuff. So let's jump ahead to some malicious content that we can do with it. So if you think about some malicious use cases, you can auto-forward the emails, right? Not exactly like straightforward solution, because if I'll write the Gmail code that we saw at the beginning and start looking for emails and try to dig and search for emails, I can't really execute it or transmit it outside of the organization or outside of the script without any I need more capability. So this is where the post to an external URL comes into the picture. I can get the information out of a certain API and use the other in order to do an exfiltration, which is actually nice. One thing to keep in mind, in order to do the auto-forwarding example, you have to install a trigger, because otherwise you'll be need to do polling all the time, and Google Apps Suite has quotas and limitations that we'll see in one of the next slides. Of course, that if you think about the web application example that we saw, the one that returns JSON or stuff like that, we can use it as a CNC server for malware command of control, for example, or stuff like that. And you're probably thinking, yeah, that's an interesting idea. So yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Carbonac actor, but they are using actually Google Apps Scripts as CNC server. We've seen it in the wild, in like a lot of customers that being attacked by this specific example. So just another thing to keep in mind, that Google is actually actively identify copies of non-abusive malicious scripts and take them down. But until they do that, they actually can do a real damage to an organization or stuff like that. But yeah, Google does some work here too in order to identify these such things. And yeah, this is actually an interesting example, because this actor is not using only Google Apps Suite, it's also using Google Forms, which is as a CNC server, which is nice to see how it's how they think or how they develop such methods. So let's go over a deeper example of getting malicious, and we'll talk about some specific examples or things that I was thinking that would be nice to see as part of this presentation. So if you're talking about malicious stuff, so the best thing to do is spreading malware via Google Drive, right? So all I need to do is, that's a simple example that I can do, is actually upload a file to my Google Drive account and create it via Metasploit or whatever I want to use. or just create it myself perhaps, and upload it to the Google Drive and start sharing with people. If I want to do it in automatic way, I can do it with Google Apps scripts, for example. Another way to spread the malware via Google Apps is get the anonymous link. I don't need individual emails in order to spread it, but I do need just the link of the anonymous link that they provide also. Like if you're an anonymous user, you can access a script and drop this example real quick. We have the Google Docs worm. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but we saw a major attack around May this year that some actor created a third-party application that called Google Docs. And we'll see screenshots from that too. And I'm going to show an example, or maybe two examples, of abusing Google Apps scripts in order to do such malicious activity. So if we're talking about the Google worm, so right here on top we had the fake request, which is not very sophisticated. I think they could do a better job with that. And in the bottom we can see the real Google sharing email. Yeah, we can see similar content here, but yeah, they could have done better job here. The interesting thing here is what it was doing. It was actually spread it by emails or and share this up with other user, and it was getting the contact out of each user and use like a propagation thing in order to spread it, like getting the contacts of each user and send this malicious app to each user. So we will be able to create this exact Google Docs scenario within Google Apps scripts. This was actually a vulnerability that we disclosed to Google a while ago. And as you can see, we have the application Google Drive, which asks for permission, and it asks to access your drive, access your contacts, and stuff like that. So who wouldn't approve, right? The only thing that suspicion here is like the developer of Google Drive, which shows my email here, but I can just like purchase a domain or something like that, and like a similar domain that will look authentic here. So yeah, that's an example. By the way, Google fixed that vulnerability real quick. I did it after the Google worm went out, and they fixed it real quick. I mean, the day after it was already done, and they added some mitigation or remediation steps in order to make it difficult to do stuff like that with Google Script. For example, if I want to see if I want to allow the permission or stuff like that, so I need to do additional step like entering some keywords like continue or stuff like that. So they did a pretty good job here. And yeah, let's see another demo that I think this is another vulnerability that I submitted to Google. And they just fixed it 2 days ago. So the attack starts with sharing actually a document with a certain user using Google Apps scripts. You can share the documents not just with Google Apps Script, you can share it with like a regular share, but in order to demonstrate the scale I chose to show it with Google Apps Script. As you can see here, this is my user. Okay, so you can see that I will share this particular file with Mr. Brown here. And you can see that Mr. Brown got an email invitation to edit a file. And this is a legitimate Google email, okay, because I'm using Google services in order to share the file. And when I press open in docs, let's see what's happened. So we see some gibberish or garbage here, and we see a model or pops up that says Google Docs and detected incorrect font encoding, and it said it downloading local file. So let's check the MD5 of this file, and while we're checking it, let's paste it. Add virus total, and we'll see what happened. Yeah, so it's a real exploit, as you can see. And as I said, Google disclosed this vulnerability something this week, 2 or 3 days ago. And yeah, so how did we do that? So let's go to the original document, and we're seeing, as you can see, Google blocked it. I mean, if I go to the documents, I'm not getting a pop-up anymore. But if you go to the script editor, we can see that it's actually contain a script like expected, right? And the script, the Google script, is very simple. What it does, we're overriding the onOpen method, and we want to execute the show sidebar, which so sidebar is creating an HTML page, the dropper page right over here, okay? And using the document app in order to show this dialog that we saw. If you go to the dropper HTML page, so here you have the loader CSS code, just some graphics, nothing too sophisticated. This particular image is actually the Google logo that I found somewhere in the wild, even not Google. I mean, not in Google. So what we actually do here is loading the loader. After that, we're displaying the main object, which is the this message, the incorrect font encoding detected, and we have this URI, which actually is a Google Drive object with an anonymous link. And when I press it, you can see that virus RTF is being downloaded. And you can see this virus RTF right here as part of my Google Drive. And you can see that it has like a shareable link that you can use and do all the stuff that you want with it. Yeah. So, what Google did in order to prevent this kind of attack or this kind of scenario is actually preventing UI elements popping up from triggers like onOpen or onEdit or stuff like that. And also they blocked it from installable triggers like the one we discussed with the auto forwarding example. So yeah, they did a pretty good job here too. What I like about working with Google about this kind of stuff, they fix it real quick. I mean, you show it to them and they said, yeah, sorry about that, no worries, we're gonna fix it. Really, really good. So the real question and interesting question is, Does this kind of attack scale? Well, I mentioned earlier that I chose to share this particular example with using Google Apps Script, and the reason I chose to do that is in order to demonstrate a way to scale up this kind of campaigns. You can do all kind of automation. You saw the script earlier, but let's go over it again. So we can see that we access the drive app. We can see that we get the file ID, which is publicly shared, like this file ID is the one over here from the URL address that you can access and see and access it easily. And while I get the file handle, I can just use the add editors method in order to do stuff and share it with other people. Right here we can see that we have a vector of email addresses that we pass to this function. It will share with these users. So yes, it does scale, but let's see some limitation and quotas. So if we're talking about quotas, you can see that they divided to regular Gmail user that has less quotas than G Suite paid user, a paying user, and you can see that you can look at the numbers and the capabilities that they're offering, like doing a URL fetch. You can do like 20K requests a day for a Gmail user, which is quite a lot, I think. If you want to create a simple CNC server, it's quite a lot. I think that's more than enough, right? The only thing here, we have some limitation. So script runtime is actually 6 minutes execution. So you cannot execute. This is all accessible in the the documentation of Google Apps Suite, by the way. You can access it publicly. So the thing is that you have only six minutes in order to execute your code. So if you have like a large inbox or stuff like that, you have to manage it right. I mean, perhaps do a script that will run another script, or try to play with it a little bit, or a script that will execute a third-party apps or install a third-party apps, or stuff like that. You can play with it and think about it and see how it works. The thing is that Google actually doing this limitation in order to prevent such malicious activity, so you also have to keep that in mind. So if you want to like do real malicious stuff, it won't be that easy. You have to like manipulate Google or start looking for holes in their mechanism or their methodology. So another thing that, another limit that they have for for script published to user outside of the developer of G Suite domain, the limit is actually 50 authorized users per day. So if I want to do something that requires an authorization, I have to keep that limitation in mind as well. And again, we have some limitation about URL fetching, post size, and stuff like that, which can prevent us from doing such malicious activity, which is actually good. Yeah, so this is the last slide, and important one, I think. So we have to talk about mitigation as part of this kind of stuff. So if we want to, if we think about the example of the self-executing JavaScript that we saw, the one that drops an exploit or a malware to my endpoint, so the common thing to do here is like using endpoint security. But the thing is, that's not always the that not always works well, because if you think about the vulnerability that Google Project Zero found not so long ago, the one with Windows Defender, so you will be obviously be thinking about, yeah, I can shut down Windows Defender or some other antiviruses. This is just an example, obviously. We have a bunch of exploits that being triggered not by double-clicking a file, like lots of examples. I mean, you can look it online and see. So the recommendation here: don't open emails from someone unfamiliar person. That's, I think, the wise thing to do here. And if we're talking about third-party application, so thing that we can do is before we press and install this app in our account, we can actually review script content if someone shares it with me, or perhaps via the API, or just double-click on the if it's a standalone script, so you can double-click it and see how it works. If it's a web app or stuff like that, so you will be needing to review script scopes or permissions in order to determine if it's a high-risk script or not. If you by mistake installed it already, so you can go to the link that I showed earlier that show all the installed application within my account and review their scopes or their permission that they asked, and revoke them if necessary. And of course, you can consider a CASB solution in order to do stuff like that. I mean, they can manage it for you and review the apps and score it and do stuff like that. Another thing that you can do is you can actually, if you're like a paying user for Google G Suite, you have in the admin console like a place that you can whitelist apps or managing third-party application, including Google Apps scripts. So, yeah, that's about it. Was questions?
Just a short question from me. Don't you think that all this stuff boils down to making a sandbox tight, like this is a sandbox execution, and we already know, say Java, that sandboxing is really hard to get right?
Actually, that's a good point. The thing about, that's an interesting question. We were thinking about that as well. The thing about third-party application or Google Apps Script is that it is being executed in Google's backend or your backend or stuff like that. So in order to do that, you can do a sandbox, but it would be something like a dynamic analysis sandbox. Like if you talk about Google Worm that we've seen in the wild, so everybody is talking about the scopes and stuff like that, but no one is talking about what it actually was doing. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Any questions from the audience? Then thank you very much.
Yeah.